Ambassador Jinho walked through the bright corridors of the Galactic Coalition headquarters, his mind still reeling from what he had witnessed in the council chamber. The gleaming walls reflected the soft blue light that filled the station, creating an atmosphere of peace and order that now felt like a cruel joke behind him. Communications Officer Haijin hurried to keep pace. Her young face was streaked with tears she had tried to hide during the council session. "Sir, I can't believe they just watched," she whispered. 17 billion people died while they talked about procedure. Jinho stopped walking and turned to face her. The pain in her eyes mirrored his own. They didn't just watch hygiene. They recorded it, laid away, added it to their historical archives like it was some kind of research project. They reached the observation deck that overlooked the main docking bay. Through the transparent walls, Jinho could see ships from dozens of different species. Sleek vessels with impossible curves, massive cargo haulers that defied gravity, and elegant diplomatic cruisers that sparkled like jewels in the artificial light. All of them belonged to civilizations that had stood by and done nothing. "What kind of alliance is this?" Haijin asked, pressing her hand against the cool surface of the window. "What's the point of having all this power if we never use it to help anyone?" Jinho had been asking himself the same question for months. Ever since humanity had joined the coalition, he had been shocked by their policies. The doctrine of non-interference sounded noble in theory, but in practice, it meant letting innocent people die while bureaucrats debated the philosophical implications of action. "They call it wisdom," he said bitterly. "They claim that interference disrupts the natural flow of evolution, that species must rise or fall on their own merits." He paused, his voice growing harder. "But there's nothing natural about genocide. Nothing evolutionary about watching children burn while you have the power to save them." The memory of the Cathara's final transmission played in his mind. The bird-like beings had been so graceful, so peaceful. Their cities had been works of art. Their music had touched the souls of every species that heard it. Now they were ash and silence. "The other ambassadors act like this is normal," Haijin continued. "Like we're the strange ones for caring, Ambassador. Keldari actually told me that humans are emotionally unstable because we wanted to send aid." Jinho felt his anger rising again. The coalition species had lived for so long under their doctrine that they had forgotten what compassion looked like. They had become observers of life rather than participants in it. They watched civilizations rise and fall like some cosmic entertainment, always maintaining their careful distance. "Sir," Haijin said quietly, "what are we going to do?" It was the question that had been haunting him. Earth's government had been so excited to join the galactic community. They'd imagined sharing knowledge, exploring the stars together, building something beautiful and lasting. Instead, they had found a collection of species that had grown cold and distant, more concerned with maintaining their precious neutrality than with doing what was right. "We're going to remember who we are," Jinho said finally. "Humans have never been good at standing by while others suffer. It's not in our nature." Through the window, he could see the Earth delegation's ship, the Soul's Pride, docked beside a massive coalition vessel. The contrast was striking. The coalition ship was smooth and perfect, designed to inspire awe and respect. The human ship was smaller, more practical, built for work rather than show. It looked ready for anything. "But what can we do?" Haijin asked. "We're one species among thousands. If we act against coalition policy, they'll expel us." Jinho smiled. For the first time since the council session, maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. Maybe we need to find our own way. He thought about the desperate transmissions that had been flooding Earth's communication networks. Pleas for help from species across the galaxy, all of them ignored by the coalition. Mining colonies facing natural disasters, research stations under attack by pirates, entire civilizations threatened by plagues or wars. The coalition documented every tragedy with perfect efficiency, but they never lifted a finger to help. Haijin, send a message to Fleet Admiral Song Ho. Tell him to prepare the fleet for independent operations. And contact Dr. Gyung at the Xenobiology Institute. I want to know everything about the species that are crying out for help. Sir, Are you suggesting we leave the coalition? I'm suggesting we do what humans have always done when faced with injustice. We fight back. We help those who can't help themselves. We become the people the galaxy needs, even if the galaxy doesn't want us. As they walked back toward their quarters, Gin-ho felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The coalition had shown them what the galaxy looked like when governed by fear and apathy. Now it was time to show the galaxy what it looked like when governed by hope and courage. The stars were full of people who needed help. Humanity was going to answer their call. Fleet Admiral Sang-ho sat alone in his small office, staring at the screen that showed the latest reports from across the galaxy. The numbers were getting worse every month. 3 entire species had died while he watched, and he felt the weight of each death pressing down on his chest like a heavy stone. The Verlani had been the first to go. Someone had released a deadly sickness into their water supply. And within weeks, their green-skinned children were dying in hospitals while their parents begged the coalition for medicine. The coalition had sent observers to study the disease, but no help. The Verlani were gone now. All of them and their empty cities stood like monuments to the galaxy's indifference. Then came the Tisseri. The small furry beings had been peaceful traders who never hurt anyone. When the raiders came, with their slave ships, the Tisseri had called for help. The coalition had held 3 emergency meetings about the situation. They had written reports, they had expressed concern, but they had not sent a single ship to fight the raiders. Now, the Tisseri worked in chains on distant worlds, their freedom just another casualty of the coalition's precious rules. The Makan had been the worst. Their sun had started to die, growing hotter and brighter each day. The coalition had the technology to fix it. Solar engineers who could repair dying stars like mechanics fixing broken engines. But the Makan were a young species barely past their first space flight. The coalition decided they were not advanced enough to deserve help. Dazo the Makan had watched their children burn under their dying sun, and their last message had been a simple question. Why won't you help us? Sang-ho rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the picture on his desk. His daughter So-young smiled back at him from the frame, her 8-year-old face bright with innocence. During his last visit home, she had asked him the same question the Makan had asked. Daddy, why won't the space people help the scared aliens? He had not known what to tell her then. He still did not know. The door chimed, and communications specialist Yujin entered. The young woman looked like she had not slept in days. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and her usually perfect uniform was wrinkled. She had been the one monitoring the distress calls, listening to the desperate pleas from across the galaxy. It was taking its toll on her. Another one, Admiral, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Zephyrians on Kepler 4 for to be. Their mining colony is in trouble. Sang-ho activated the display, and the tactical screen filled with data. The Zephyrians were tall, thin beings with silver skin that reflected light like mirrors. They had been mining rare crystals on a planet near their sun when the star began producing massive flares. The radiation was slowly poisoning their atmosphere, and they had maybe 4 days before the air became too dangerous to breathe. 47,000 people, Yujin continued. Families, children, old people, are trapped there with no way to evacuate themselves. On the screen, Sang-ho could see the Zephyrian leader speaking directly to the camera. Though the alien's features were strange, his desperation was unmistakable. Behind him, Sang-ho could see young Zephyrians clinging to their parents, their silver skin already showing the dark patches that meant radiation sickness. What's the coalition's response? Sang-ho asked, though he already knew the answer. They've classified it as a natural stellar event. No. Intervention authorized. They're sending a science team to study the solar flares, but no rescue ships. Sang-ho felt something break inside his chest. These were children dying, and the coalition wanted to study the phenomenon that was killing them. It was beyond cruel. It was evil. How long to reach them? He asked. Yujin checked her calculations. 18 hours at maximum speed. But Admiral, we'd be leaving coalition space without permission. They could court-martial us for this. The office door slid open again, and Captain Minho stepped inside. The older man's face was grim, but his eyes burned with determination. He had been listening to the conversation from the hallway. Sir Minho said, "The Bizen's hammer is ready to launch. My crew is already at battle stations. We can be moving in 10 minutes. Sang-ho looked at both officers. Yujin was scared but resolute. Minho was calm and ready. These were good people, the kind who joined the fleet to help others and protect the innocent. They should not have to choose between following orders and saving lives. The coalition will be furious, Sang-ho said slowly. They'll accuse us of violating their sacred doctrine. They might even try to stop us. Let them try, Minho replied. My daughter is the same age as some of those Zephyrian children. If someone threatened her, I'd want the whole galaxy to come running. Yujin nodded. Sir, I've been listening to these calls for months. I can't take it anymore. We have to do something. Sang-ho stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the other ships in the human fleet. Good ships with good crews, all of them frustrated by the coalitions. In action, they had joined the fleet to explore the stars and help people, not to sit by and watch children die. Signal all ships, he said finally. Full combat readiness. We launch in 1 hour.
Ow!
Should I inform the coalition? Yujin asked. Sang-ho smiled grimly. Let them figure it out when they notice we're gone. Dr. Jiyoung walked slowly through the narrow hallways of Sanctuary Station, her hand gently guiding an elderly Menthri scholar who stumbled with exhaustion. The alien's body was made of living crystal that usually sparkled with inner light, but now it looked dull and gray. Behind them, a dozen more Menthri refugees followed, their crystalline feet clicking softly against the metal floor. The station was hidden deep inside the Veil Nebula, where the swirling gases and magnetic fields made it impossible for anyone to find them. What had started as a small rescue operation had grown into something much larger. Sanctuary Station now housed refugees from dozens of different species, all of them saved from certain death while the coalition watched and did nothing. Are you comfortable? Asked the old scholar in the universal trade language. The Menthri's thoughts touched her mind like a gentle whisper, filled with gratitude and wonder. His people had been trapped on a research station when pirates surrounded them, demanding they hand over their ancient knowledge. The coalition had classified it as an internal dispute and refused to help. By the time the human fleet arrived, half the scholars were already dead. Security Chief Taeho met them at the entrance to the refugee quarters. His face was tired but determined. He had been working without sleep for 3 days, coordinating the constant flow of rescue missions. Doctor, that's the last of the Menthri. We've got them settled in Section C with the other scholars. Gyeong nodded and watched as the refugees were led to their new homes. The station had been built to house maybe 1,000 people, but now it held over 50,000 beings from 43 different species. Humans worked alongside tall, blue-skinned Altarians and small, furry Velkins to make everyone comfortable. Despite the crowded conditions, there was a sense of hope in the air. These people were alive when they should have been dead. Any word from the rescue teams? Jiyoung asked as they walked toward the command center. Captain Dong-ho just returned from the Kepler system. He managed to evacuate 3,000 Zephorians before the solar flares killed them. The coalition was still debating whether to send a science team to study the phenomenon. Gyeong shook her head in disgust. The coalition's obsession with studying everything while helping nothing had become a sick joke among the rescue crews. They would write detailed reports about how species died, but they would never lift a finger to save them. The command center was a chaos of activity. Engineer Yunho stood in front of a massive holographic display that showed the galaxy with dozens of red dots scattered across it. Each dot represented a world in danger, a species crying out for help that would never come from the coalition. We've got new requests coming in faster than we can handle, Yunho reported, his voice strained. The Corvani Republic is threatening to wipe out the Pixari unless they give up their mining rights. The Tessari survivors are being hunted by slavers. The Makin are facing a second wave of solar radiation. Gyeong studied the display. So many worlds, so many people in danger. The scale of the galaxy's suffering was overwhelming. How many ships do we have available? 300 active vessels, Taeho replied. But we're getting help from unexpected places, it turns out humans aren't the only ones who think the Coalition's policies are wrong. Through the command center's large windows, Guiyang could see the mixed fleet preparing for another mission. Human ships worked alongside vessels from other species, all of them united by a simple belief that you don't watch good people die. When you have the power to save them, Captain Dong Ho entered the command center, still wearing his battle-scarred armor. His ship had taken damage during the Zephyrian rescue, but he was already planning the next mission. "Doctor, we need to talk about the Pixari situation. They're not just facing extinction, they're facing genocide." Guiyang pulled up the intelligence reports. The Pixari were a young species, barely past the Stone Age. They lived in small tribes on a world rich in rare crystals. The Corvani Republic wanted those crystals, and they were willing to kill every Pixari to get them. To make it worse, the Pixari had no idea what was happening. They thought the strange ships in their sky were gifts from their gods. "The Coalition's response?" Guiyang asked. "They're monitoring the situation from 50 light-years away," Dong Ho replied bitterly. "They say the Pixari are too primitive to qualify for intervention. Apparently, you need to invent space travel before your life has value." Yun Ho brought up tactical projections on the display. "We could evacuate maybe half the population before the Corvani arrive. But we'd need every ship we have." "What about the other missions?" Taeho asked. "The Tessari, survivors, the Makan colonies, the Verlani research stations." Jiang felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. There were too many people to save, and not enough ships to save them all. Every decision meant choosing who lived and who died. It was a burden that should have been shared by the entire galaxy, but instead, it fell on the shoulders of a few humans and their alien allies. "We save who we can," she said finally. "We can't rescue everyone, but we can rescue someone, and maybe that's enough." Outside the window, the rescue fleet began to move, carrying hope to worlds the Coalition had already written off as lost. Admiral Sang Ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the New Seoul, staring at the tactical display with growing horror. The Devourers had finally arrived at the galaxy's edge, and they were even worse than the reports had suggested. Each creature was the size of a small moon, wrapped in dark energy that ate everything it touched. Matter, energy, even light itself disappeared when it came near them. The bridge crew worked in tense silence around him. Everyone knew what they were facing. The Devourers were ancient beings that had consumed entire star systems and other galaxies. They moved slowly but steadily, eating everything in their path. Nothing had ever stopped them before. "Sir Commander," Hyunho called from his station, "we're getting evacuation requests from 800 star systems. That's over 2 trillion people asking for help." Sang Ho pulled up the Coalition's response on his personal screen. The official message was cold and clinical. Priority evacuation authorized for core worlds and Coalition member species only. Outer Rim territories classified as expendable. Expendable, Sang Ho repeated quietly. 2 trillion living beings, and the Coalition called them expendable. He thought of the Pixari children they had saved last month, the Zephyrian families, the Minthari scholars. All of them lived in the outer territories. All of them would die if someone didn't stand in the way. The main display showed the Coalition. Fleet retreating toward the galaxy's center. Thousands of ships moving away from the danger, leaving entire civilizations to face the Devourers alone. It was the final proof that the Coalition cared more about survival than about doing what was right. "All ships," Sang Ho announced over the fleet communication system. "This is Admiral Sang Ho. I know what I'm about to ask seems impossible. Oh, the Coalition thinks we're crazy. Maybe we are, but we're going to stand and fight." On the tactical display, the human fleet began to move. 300 ships spread out across 3 light-years of space, forming a thin line directly in the path of the approaching Devourers. Behind them, billions of aliens watched in disbelief as humanity prepared to face certain death to buy them time to escape. "Captain," Yonho's voice crackled over the communication system from his ship, the Daegu's Defiance. "Admiral, my crew asked me to tell you something. They said they're honored to serve with you. Whatever happens next, we're proud to be here." Similar messages came from across the fleet. Captain Minho from the Bizen's Hammer, Commander Yujin from the Asterisk Inchins, Hope Asterisk. Hundreds of officers and crew members, all of them knowing they were about to die, all of them choosing to stay anyway. "The honor is mine," Sang-Ho replied, his voice thick with emotion. "All ships, begin evacuation support. 2 every minute we hold this line is another transport full of refugees that reaches safety." The first devourer emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Space itself seemed to bend around it, and the stars dimmed in its presence. The creature moved with terrible purpose, its dark energy reaching out like hungry fingers. "All ships, open fire," Sang-Ho commanded. The human fleet unleashed everything they had. Energy weapons, missile salvos, even experimental quantum torpedoes. The weapons struck the devourer's surface and exploded in brilliant flashes of light. For a moment, Sang-Ho dared to hope. Then the light faded, and the devourer continued forward, completely unharmed. Their most powerful weapons had done nothing more than tickle it. Kara called Communications Officer Sujin. "The creature is targeting the Soul's Pride. Captain Lee's ship is taking heavy damage." On the screen, Sang-Ho watched as one of his ships was slowly consumed by the dark energy. The hull dissolved like sugar in water, and the crew's final transmission was cut short. But even as the Soul's Pride died, 2 more ships moved up to take its place. Sir Sujin continued, "We're getting reports from across the galaxy. The Altarians are forming their own defensive line. The Velkans are doing the same. Some coalition ships are breaking formation to help." Sang-Ho felt a surge of hope. Maybe their sacrifice was inspiring others. Maybe courage really was contagious. The battle continued for 18 hours. Human ships fell one by one, consumed by the Devourer's hunger, but they never broke formation. For every vessel lost, 2 more moved up to take its place. Watched as humanity demonstrated that some things were worth dying for. Finally, Communications Officer Sujin gave the report they had been waiting for. "Sir, the last evacuation transport has cleared the danger zone. 2 trillion people are safe." Sang-Ho looked around his bridge at the exhausted faces of his crew. They had done it. They had saved 2 trillion lives, and the cost had been terrible. 60% of the human fleet was gone, consumed by the Devourers. But the people they had died to protect were alive. "All ships," he announced, "begin withdrawal. We've done what we came to do." As the surviving human ships retreated, Sang-Ho looked back at the Devourers. They were still there, still hungry, still dangerous. But they were no longer unopposed. Across the galaxy, other species were forming their own defensive lines. Inspired by humanity's example, the galaxy had finally learned that some things were worth fighting for. Captain J-Ho stood in the command center of Haven Station, looking out at the bustling activity below. 5 years had passed since the Devourer crisis, and the galaxy was a different place. The massive station floated in space like a small city, its corridors filled with beings from dozens of different species. Children with silver skin played alongside furry humanoids, while crystalline scholars shared knowledge with tentacled engineers. This was humanity's new home base. Built from the wreckage of the old coalition system, Haven Station housed over 500,000 refugees who had nowhere else to go. The coalition still existed, but nobody looked to them for help anymore. Their grand council chambers had become empty halls where old aliens debated meaningless laws, while the real work of protecting the galaxy happened elsewhere. "Captain, Communications Specialist Nayang called from her station. We have an emergency transmission coming in." Unknown species, they're calling themselves the Threnody. Jeho walked over to the main display as the signal came through. The beings on the screen were unlike anything he had seen before. They had long, flexible arms that ended in delicate hands, and their large eyes held a sadness that seemed to go soul deep. Behind them, he could see what looked like a dying world, with gray skies and withered plants. "We don't know if anyone can hear us," the lead Threnody said, in broken universal language. "Our world is dying. The machines came from the sky, and they are eating our air. Our children cannot breathe. Please, if anyone is listening, we need help." Nayang ran the signal. Through the computer systems, "Sir, It looks like their planet is being strip-mined by automated processors. Someone is stealing their atmosphere to extract rare gases. At this rate, they'll all suffocate within 3 weeks. Jae-ho felt the familiar anger rising in his chest. Someone was literally stealing the air from an entire species, and he could guess what the Coalition's response would be. What's their classification status? Pre-contact primitives, Na-young replied. The Coalition has already decided they're too undeveloped to qualify for intervention. They're not even going to send observers around the command center. The mixed crew of humans, Altarians, and former Coalition rebels waited for orders. These were people who had chosen to leave their old lives behind and join the Protection Alliance, a new organization that had grown from humanity's refusal to let others suffer. How many Threnody are there? Jae-ho asked. 40 million, sir. Men, women, children, all of them facing slow death by suffocation. The holographic display flickered to life, and Fleet Admiral Song-ho appeared. The old warrior looked tired, but determined. His hair had gone completely gray since the Devourer crisis, and new lines marked his face. But his eyes still burned with the same fierce compassion that had made him stand against impossible odds. Captain Jae-ho, Song-ho said, the Protection Alliance fleet is ready to respond. We have 47 ships in your sector, including medical vessels and atmospheric processors of our own. Jae-ho smiled. This was how things worked now. Someone cried for help, the Alliance answered. They didn't hold debates or file reports. They acted. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Plot a course for the Threnody system. Maximum speed. As the protection fleet began to move, Jae-ho thought about how much had changed. The Coalition still held their endless meetings in their crystal chambers, still passed their careful resolutions, still maintained their precious neutrality. But when the vulnerable cried out for help, they no longer looked to the Coalition. They looked to the stars. Where human ships and their allies carried a simple message, we hear you, we're coming. Ah! Communications Officer Min-young looked up from her console with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. Sir, we're getting similar distress calls from 12 other sectors. Mining colonies under attack, research stations facing natural disasters, entire species threatened by plagues. Are the Alliance fleets responding? Yes, sir. Every call is being answered. Altarians are handling the situation in the Vega sector. The Velkeens are responding to the plague outbreak near the rim. Even some reformed Coalition ships are helping. Jae-ho nodded. The galaxy had learned something important from humanity's example. It had learned that standing by while others suffered was not wisdom, it was cowardice. The Protection Alliance was not perfect. They could not save everyone, and they made mistakes. But they were there. They answered the call. Na-young sent a message to the Threnody. Tell them help is on the way. As she composed the message, Jae-ho walked to the observation deck. Through the transparent walls, he could see the stars stretching endlessly in all directions. Each point of light represented worlds full of life, some thriving, some struggling, some dying. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, full of threats that could destroy entire civilizations, but it was also full of hope. Somewhere among those stars, human ships and their allies were racing toward worlds in need. They carried medical supplies, food, weapons, and most importantly, the promise that no one would ever again have to face extinction alone. The Coalition had taught the galaxy to watch and document suffering. Humanity had taught it to fight back. And now, finally, the galaxy had guardians who would answer when the innocent called for help. The stars were full of life worth protecting, and there were people ready to protect it.